Captain James Reed stood in the dimly lit museum aboard the United Earth ship Defiant, staring at the ancient pistol displayed in the reinforced glass case. The M1911 handgun had seen combat a millennium ago, surviving wars that had once seemed significant but were now mere footnotes in human history. Still admiring that primitive weapon, Captain? The voice belonged to Ambassador Tolk, the hulking blue-skinned diplomat from the Vixari Confederacy. "It reminds me where we came from," Reed replied without turning around. "Sometimes the old ways have value." The ambassador snorted, a peculiar whistling sound through his 4 nostrils. "Quaint. My species developed energy weapons before we left our oceans. Your ancestors were still using combustion and metal projectiles when you reached your moon." Reed finally turned to face his guest. The peace talks with the Vixari had been tense. Their technological superiority made them arrogant, dismissive of humanity's place at the galactic table. "Every species takes their own path, Ambassador. Some paths are more efficient than others," Tolk replied with a dismissive wave of his 6-fingered hand. "Your weapons museum is charming but irrelevant to our discussions. The Coalition expects concrete assurances about the border systems." Reed nodded politely. "Of course, but first, would you join me for the demonstration I mentioned? It might provide context for our negotiations." The ambassador's brow ridge furrowed, but curiosity won out. "Very well. Lead on, Captain." In the observation deck overlooking the ship's vast hangar bay, Reed gestured toward the window. Below them, a team of technicians were positioning what appeared to be a replica of the museum's pistol, but scaled up to the size of a small shuttlecraft. "What is this?" Tolk asked, mandibles clicking in confusion. "Project Ancestry," Reed explained. "An homage to human ingenuity." Lieutenant Anna Miller approached with a data pad. "We're ready, sir. All systems nominal." "Proceed," Reed ordered. The massive gun-shaped craft hummed to life, its barrel illuminating with a soft blue glow. Tolk leaned forward, his species equivalent of a frown deepening. "You've created an energy weapon in the shape of your primitive projectile launcher? For what purpose? Nostalgia?" Reed smiled. "Not quite. Watch." A target drone released at the far end of the hangar bay began flying in erratic patterns. The giant gun tracked it smoothly and with a flash fired. But instead of an energy beam or projectile, a distortion wave rippled through space. When it touched the drone, the machine simply disappeared. Tolk's 4 eyes widened. "What technology is this? Some form of matter disruption?" "No," Reed said quietly. "Dimensional displacement. The projectile doesn't destroy the target, it relocates it." "To where?" Tolk demanded, his earlier condescension replaced by unmistakable alarm. "A pocket dimension. A space between spaces that our scientists discovered 50 years ago. We can retrieve objects later if we choose." Reed turned to face the ambassador directly. "Or we can leave them there indefinitely." 3 hours later in the conference room, the peace talks had taken a decidedly different tone. Ambassador Tolk's delegation sat rigidly in their chairs, their earlier swagger noticeably diminished. "This dimensional weapon," Tolk said carefully, "it violates no less than 7 provisions of the Galactic Armament Treaties." Commander Tom Wilson, Reed's second-in-command, leaned forward. "Treaties that Earth never signed, Ambassador. Treaties that the Coalition declined to include us in. Drafting because your species was deemed technologically immature," Tolk replied, his voice lacking its earlier conviction. Reed placed a small device on the table that projected a hologram of the weapon system. "The P911 dimensional displacement platform is merely our first implementation. We've already developed variants twice this size, capable of affecting targets as large as cruisers." "Impossible," whispered one of Tolk's aides, a slender being with translucent skin. "Your energy requirements would be solved," Wilson interrupted. 0-point energy taps combined with quantum stabilizers. The technology is still in its infancy, but remarkably efficient. Reed watched the realization spread through the alien delegation. Humanity, the upstarts they had dismissed as barely spaceworthy, had developed something genuinely new, something threatening. "We don't share this to intimidate." Reed said softly, but to establish mutual respect. Humanity wishes to join the galactic community as equals, not subordinates. Tolk was silent for a long moment. Your species continues to surprise, Captain. Perhaps we have been hasty in our assessment. We all have things to learn from each other, Reed replied. Your energy weapon technology is still superior to ours in many ways. Yet you took a primitive concept and evolved it into something unprecedented. Tolk's inner eyelids blinked rapidly, a sign of deep thought among his kind. Most species abandon old technologies entirely. Humans seem to transform them instead. Reed nodded toward the viewport where the stars streaked by as the ship traveled faster than light. That's the human way, Ambassador. We don't just grow, we adapt, reimagine, transform. That old gun in our museum isn't just history, it's inspiration. As the diplomatic party departed 2 days later, the terms of the agreement far more favorable to Earth than anyone had anticipated, Reed found himself back in the museum, standing before the ancient pistol. They're calling it the Reed Doctrine, Wilson said as he joined his captain. Respect through innovation rather than imitation. Reed smiled slightly. Our ancestors would be proud. They built tools that served their needs with the technology they had. We're doing the same, just with different materials and understanding. The Vexari still don't quite understand why we keep these relics, Wilson observed. They will someday, Reed replied, tapping the glass gently. Everything old becomes new again, if you look at it the right way. In the hangar bay below, technicians were already at work on the next generation of the weapon platform, adapting, improving, growing, just as humanity always had. The universe had laughed at their primitive beginnings, but no one was laughing now.